Canada's first world champion in diving is Blythe Hartley, and she's in Brisbane, Australia, where she lives with her family. Blythe, take us back to Fukuoka in 2001 when you were a 19-year-old and what that world championship meant to you personally at the time.
Yeah, I mean, it takes me back a number of years, but, I was reflecting a lot on, I guess my diving career in general, but specifically, the World Championships at Fukuoka. And it was just a very special time because, I really didn't have any expectations going into that competition and going in and just really enjoyed it. And I knew that I had a chance to make the podium or even, a chance to make the final really was the goal. So I just remember that day specifically in the event of just being so genuinely shocked that I had won and just all around enjoyment. So I look back very fondly at that time, and it's definitely one of the highlights of my career.
You won the 1 meter world championship again at home in Montreal in 2005, the only time the World Aquatics Championships were held in Canada. I remember being there. I remember the crowds were great. What was it like for you to be able to win and have that victory at home?
Yeah, that was definitely top of the list when I think about highlights in my career. Again, I think at that competition, there was a little bit more pressure. I mean, at that point, I had established myself as one of the better divers in the world, especially on 1 meter. I just remember going into that competition and thinking, like, I don't want to let down the home crowd. And I knew I had a chance. And, I remember thinking, like, okay, just use the crowd to your advantage. And it was just such a festive event. And even though the nerves were high, it was so much fun. And then at the end of it, when it came together and, I actually won, it was such a fun feeling to have that happen at home and to celebrate with everyone. So I definitely look back on that really fondly.
There's always the burden of expectation, and Canadian female divers have been successful in the past. What must it be like for divers like Mia and for Pamela Ware and the other young Canadian divers to follow in the footsteps of people like you and Emily Haymans and Jennifer Abel and face that burden of expectation? How do you do that?
Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, I sometimes think as an athlete, I wish I had the perspective that I have now, maybe to the physicality that I had 20 years ago. But, I think looking back, we all sort of face that because women, Canadian divers have always been quite strong. And I think when there's some retirements and you're sort of then, thrust into a focus area, it can be a really big pressure that can be distracting if you're continuously comparing yourself or hoping that you live up to expectations or hoping that you're good enough. But once again, I think it's really important to sort of, know who you are and know that you'll never be that exact person, and if you continuously compare yourself, you'll just derail. So, I think there's so much talent and it's such an exciting time because the pipeline is just incredible in women's diving. And then I think once those individuals are thrust into the spotlight and get those opportunities, to remember why they've reached that point and what they bring, to the diving board and what makes them successful, and not be too distracted by the legacy or the history.
Last one, Blythe. Can you tell us what it's like at the World Championships in front of a packed arena to hit that perfect dive and rip the entry and know from the get-go when you surface you got it done? What's that like?
I was just describing it today, coincidentally. I was saying, I would get really nervous in competition, but there's nothing that really compares to, a really great dive or coming through in, a high pressure, high profile competition and just knowing that you've absolutely nailed the dive. It's just complete enjoyment when you hit the water, and then you just know, and then when you come out and you hear the noise, it's such a thrill. And I look back and feel so fortunate that I was able to experience that, and I really cherish that experience because you don't really get that outside of the pool in day-to-day life. So, I mean, my kids cheer for me sometimes, but not to the same extent. So it's just something that's so unique to sport. And I just think that was really a highlight of my diving career.
Blythe, you're a great champion. Thanks so much for doing this, and all the best to you and your family.
Thank you. Likewise. And thanks so much for having me.